Hey, welcome to MC Mad Talk of Civil War. This is episode 18, Raids of the Civil War. Hope everybody's having a good Sunday. MC put together a short list of some raids he wants to cover. Why don't you go ahead and take it away, sir?
Okay, I was going to go ahead and start with Shelby's raid, but before we get started, let me explain what we're talking about. What we're talking about are basically cavalry raids and what their effects were overall, and from a tactical standpoint, and also from a strategic standpoint. There were several raids by both forces deep into enemy territory. Sometimes they were in conjunction with other forces and other movements. In general, however, they were not. They were just commanders trying to do things on their own, hoping to create a result, hoping to create something that happened in there. And so raids, all right, of the war, and that is Shelby's raid. All right. And let me pull up a map, if you don't mind, and let me share this map. If I can find out where I put it. There it is. All right. Can you see my map?
Yep, I got it presented to everybody. Yeah.
Okay. So at the start of the map, or the start of this, what you see is this green part right here, which is the start of his ride, right, in 1863. Now, the situation in 1863, you'll notice this is in September of 1863 is when this begins. The situation is Vicksburg has fallen. The situation is also Gettysburg has the disaster at Gettysburg has been completed. All right.
Yeah, sent Lee running across the Potomac like he has sent the Yankees doing so many times before. Yeah.
Okay. So, and we'll get to those battles in a while, but this raid here was intended, all right, to do a couple of things. Now, Shelby, like a lot of the commanders in the war, was an extraordinarily vain individual. All right. He wanted a success. He wanted to be well known. He was a flamboyant type of a character. All right. But at the same time, he was a good commander. I'm trying to blow this up so if I can, but I can't move it around very easily. So I apologize. I'll have to leave it at this size. And what he personally wanted out of this raid, okay, was he wanted a promotion. All right, he wanted he felt that he had fought earlier in several other campaigns. He had been badly wounded in a previous battle earlier in the year, all right, at Helena, during the defeat of Helena, but so he comes back home. They're obviously in Arkansas once again. Vicksburg, which you can see down here, has fallen. Right, so now all the way across here, what you have are Union. The Union has split the Mississippi. It has control of the Mississippi all throughout here. And what are we going to do in the West? All right, with the Confederacy split in half. So he comes up with the plan to try and raise as absolute much havoc as he possibly can through the state of Missouri, all right, to try and draw back some of the forces that are out here in Tennessee specifically now, and draw them back possibly into Missouri, all right, thereby allowing the other Confederate forces here under Johnston, all right, to possibly be able to make an attack, possibly relieve pressure on Chattanooga at this point. We'll be talking about the Battle of Chattanooga a little bit later. All right. And also you end up with the situation because it's through Chattanooga that you're going to see
If he would have been successful and the forces would have been pulled back into Missouri, could Johnston have maybe tried to retake Vicksburg? It had just fallen. I mean, the Union couldn't have had it that good of a hold on it yet.
Not Vicksburg. It could have allowed them to pull pressure though back to possibly attack Memphis. All right, because really all you need is a lifeline. If you can take Memphis then and break the blockade that way, I mean, that would have been the biggest way to do it. The forces here in Mississippi were totally defeated at this point. It would have given them time though to possibly build another force. All right, it definitely would have delayed the attack on Atlanta, etc.
You know what?
And it also would have.
You know what I just realized? Jefferson Davis was from Mississippi, right? So the fact that Vicksburg and the whole force in his home state had fallen pretty much had to actually cut pretty deep, right?
Oh yeah, yes it did. I mean, he was smarting from that. All right. I mean, these defeats. I mean, these are people's lives that were happening. I mean, they were smarting. So anyway, let's kick off. He begins it here. All right. You see now that he's getting forward, right? And he attacks a camp of Jayhawkers, all right, and Confederate deserters, and then he wipes them all out. All right. Now, what were Jayhawkers? Right. Well, Jayhawkers were an irregular force from Kansas, and they were basically doing the same kind of things that Quantrill's Raiders were, right? And as you see, this is the areas that he's going through as he comes through each and every area here. All right, and he fights. Here he encounters Colonel Cloud with his 6th Kansas Cavalry, but Cloud runs. Now, this was a major mistake by Cloud. Okay, yes, his forces were outnumbered, but you're holding a position along a river, all right? You should have been able to prevent the crossing. You should have at least attempted to fight there. I really think that was a massive mistake on his part.
How big was his raiding party? Because he goes pretty far, so he had quite a few troops underneath him, right?
I think he had like 2,500 men. Well, I think that's what it was. Let's take a look at that. I'm trying to remember the size of his force.
But
no, not really. I mean, his command was only 600 to 750 men.
Oh wow, they can move quickly then, at least. But yeah,
well, fairly
smaller
quickly
than I would imagine.
I thought it is much smaller than what I thought it was. He picks up more men. He gets 1,000 here. That's why sometimes trying to figure out how many how many forces he has at any point in time is kind of difficult. So at some points he's over 1,000.
All right, we'll continue with the raid here.
Okay. You see, let's go over to here. This is where he gets his first, I guess, influence or reinforcement, and in they go. They cross into Missouri, and they begin to just wreak havoc. All right. His raiders encountered a Federal cavalry. They surrounded the garrison and attack it. The Federals surrender. His men burned the town. All right, another town is burnt and the courthouse is raided, but they get supplies. And this shows you how a lot of these raids actually went. They're basically at this point trying to raise havoc. So taking a town, raiding the supplies, and burning it down. You know, that's normal things. All right, a militia fight takes place here. Now this is the Missouri militia. There's several Missouri militia that he fights all along the way here. All right. Another small force of cavalry. You can see he's just successfully just taking town after town. All right, but you also see something else. He's constantly on the move. And the reason is because he's being chased. He's being chased by about 2,800 cavalry, Federal cavalry. All right.
Well, what does he do with the prisoners? He can't take them with him.
Okay. What they do at this point in time in the war is he's taking a picture, he's capturing them, and then he's saying, okay, now you've been successfully captured. okay, we're going to release you, all right, but you can't fight anymore until you're successfully traded. So your name is taken down, that you've been captured, and then we're going to release you on your own recognizance, but you can't rejoin until you've been officially traded back, all right, during a prisoner exchange. And
does that actually work?
Well, in reality, it actually works very successfully for the South, but not so much for the North. Both sides did this. Both sides would take the names of the person that was captured, and they would say, okay, as long as you don't, you were going to be released to go back home, and you are considered captured until your name is traded during a prisoner swap. And
but yeah, what's stopping you from being like whatever and just going back and rejoining?
If you rejoin, all right, and you get captured again, you can be executed for violating your parole.
Oh, well, that's an incentive.
It is an incentive, but at the same time, when you're in a battle fighting anyway, with bullets flying around you, it's not much of a where you could be worried and killed, for this. It's not much of an incentive, but overall, what did happen during this situation is many times the Union forces would live up to their pardon. They would go home, but the Southerners, because obviously they're strapped for resources, and what's worse is a man who's been in that situation, if he goes back home, they're doing conscription, and the situation is that they're desperate. All right, so a lot of these guys go right back and rejoin the Confederate forces again, and it's this policy of repatriate. It's this policy and their policy of repatriating the prisoners of war that gets changed when Grant takes over.
Yeah, and then they really start to starve the South for manpower. Anyway, go ahead and continue. I was just wondering, like, how does that even really work?
For the most part, this is the thing that people don't realize. During the Civil War, during these time periods, people had an honor code. People believed in living up to their word. So these things had an effect. Even like I was trying to point out with the South, many of the Southerners ended up rejoining, not so much because they were violating their own honor code. They were rejoining because they were frankly ordered to at the point of a gun, saying, well, it's conscription and you're supposed to be in the army. We're taking you again.
But all right.
Right. Now you're starting to see people are getting warned about that he's in the area. Right, here's at Florence, Missouri. All right, they've evacuated, and the people start to evacuate in front of him. All right, now of course he's still able to take the town. All right, his men arrive, but they stop to raid the town's suppliers of food. Basically, they're just taking the food because the people are running away. They're trying to get out of the way. Here, this is a major railroad area, right? He attacks and tries to tear us up several miles worth of railroad. This is another thing that they would constantly do on these raids, is they were focusing a lot on trying to destroy the railroads, and you'll see that even more though when with what Sherman does, because Sherman doesn't just take and tear up a few miles of railroad; he tears up hundreds and hundreds of miles of railroad.
Yeah, I know, and he heats up the bars or whatever and bends them around trees and shit.
Well, that's what everyone does. I mean, the difference is, of course, is steel is coming out of the ears in the Union, right? Steel is at a premium for the South. So the ability to build railroad track is easy for the Union, but not for this Confederacy.
And he starts to hit resistance up here by Columbia, it looks like, because he ends up doing an end around and fucking running.
At this point, okay, what his idea was, he was actually intending to come up here and then swing to the right and actually go try and threaten Missouri or St. Louis, Missouri. But
Oh, is it
unfortunately,
him that gets right outside of St. Louis but turns around, or
no,
is that a different raiding party?
that's a different one. You'll see that he doesn't. He is stopped here at Crittenden because Crittenden has regular Federals. All right, and now he begins this becomes a chase. All right, because General Brown has finally started to catch up with them. All right, and he has to run. So at this point, he dumps empty artillery wagons into the Missouri River and is running all the way back home, and begins basically a flight. And he's still in enemy territory, so he's still trying to destroy things as he goes. Another skirmish here. So he's fighting. He's doing a fighting withdrawal now the entire way.
How long is this raid? It looks like 300, 400 miles almost, right? Or am I just looking at the map wrong? I don't see...
It's about 800 miles in total.
That's pretty impressive considering he didn't get killed or captured.
Nope, he didn't get killed or captured. He finally makes it back home on November 3rd. So he started in September 22nd, gets back in November 3rd. It's 40-something days for the raid. He covered over 800 miles. There's a lot of questions about just what he was able to do. How successful it was.
Does he pull some troops out of Tennessee?
No, because actually what's happening is during his ride, one of the things that happens that he finds about later is you have the Battle of Chickamauga, all right, but Chickamauga wasn't able to force the Federals out of Chattanooga. So, and that then, because Chickamauga, while it's a Confederate victory, and one of the sad parts from the perspective of Shelby is it takes away all of the press. The press is about the Battle of Chickamauga, all right, which we'll also talk about as a considerable Confederate victory, Bragg's only Confederate victory, if you really want to assign it to Bragg. All right, but
I don't want to give him credit for anything, but anyway.
But the forces stay in Chattanooga, and mainly because of what Chattanooga is. Okay, Chattanooga was great in that it's a railroad hub, right? And it's the railroad hub, one of the biggest railroad hubs going north to south. All right, so it's one of the big major hubs that's supplying the armies of Northern Virginia, all right, and keeping that link to the Confederacy. All right. When it falls, however, it's a railroad hub. All right. Now the Union can use it. Okay, and the Union can keep getting supplied all the way from Missouri, all the way through Nashville and so forth when they begin their attacks. Okay, so it's a great point to have on both sides. Both sides can then use it. All right, and unfortunately for the Confederacy, after Bragg pulls out of Chattanooga, all right, and we're going to go, like I said, we'll talk about the battles of Chattanooga. There's a series of 3 battles. Chickamauga's the middle one. The first one is with Rosecrans basically forcing Bragg in a series of flanking maneuvers out of Chattanooga because Rosecrans has the forces, right, to actually invest Chattanooga. All right, so he could have, if Bragg would have stayed in Chattanooga, he would have been surrounded and then probably defeated over time. It would have become another Vicksburg. All right. But by the same token, it was something that they couldn't allow the Union to have. It was a major railroad hub. It was a major supply point. By losing Chattanooga, the Confederacy really lost a lot of support. And it also lost one of the supply lines that becomes very important later on because it's one of the supply lines to Atlanta. And
and later on Atlanta. Well, we'll cover Atlanta.
Well, you're going to see where they come down. They basically come right down the railroad lines, right down into Atlanta from Chattanooga.
Yeah, torches in hand. Anyway,
Well, you mean
the offer's still on the table.
like the torches that were being used here.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um,
But once again,
no,
he gets back. We were talking about the raid itself. He claims that he had killed 600 Federals. All right, 500 were captured and paroled. All right, and then obviously tons of supplies and so forth were wrecked. And in that regard, okay, to be honest, I don't find his claims about the number of dead and the numbers of captured really all that outrageous.
Yeah, if he was gonna lie, don't you think he would have lied a little bit bigger, especially if he's going shooting for a promotion?
Well, they claim that they went 1,500 miles. All right, so there was a bit of exaggeration in what's going on. All right.
Well, that run back home probably felt like they went 1,500 miles.
Yeah, that's true. But from that standpoint, I mean, you could say it was successful. Like I said, and he does get promoted to brigadier general for his raid. So from Shelby's standpoint, personally, it's a success, right? But it doesn't raise, it doesn't cause the Southern sympathies in these areas, right, to truly rise up against the Union forces in any kind of meaningful way. All right. And the Union is not forced in any way to actually try to reinforce Missouri. So from that standpoint, from the strategic standpoint, it was really ineffective. All right. But that's also due to the situation in the East, all right, becoming untenable. And what I mean by the East, I'm talking about Chattanooga and the Chattanooga area.
Oh, okay. You're not talking about the Army in Northern Virginia. I was a little confused there for a second. But also, would it really inspire people to rise up against the Union? Didn't you just burn their house down? Don't they need Union help to rebuild their homes that you just burnt?
You got to remember that there's a lot of Southern sympathies all the way through Missouri, right? The intent is to play upon that and try to get them to commit acts of sabotage, all right, continuous sabotage on the railroads and so forth, right? And so a raid like this is intended to show that the Union can't protect you, that the Confederacy is still around, just help us out, we can win this battle. So that's the kind of idea that you're trying to play to. It was the same general idea, right, that they expected to see from Maryland when Lee started marching through Maryland. He expected to gain support. He could, places to hide, to continue the guerrilla type actions. All right, and to some extent, you do have this going on throughout the Raiders to begin with, Quantrill's and everything else, but.
Well, I mean, a lot of the Confederate spies came out of Maryland. I mean, there was Confederate spies everywhere in D.C.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Union spies came out of frickin' Richmond. It was just Spy Haven. What are you talking about? That old corridor was littered with spies.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Both sides. Yeah, and we'll get to the Confederate Secret Service and the Union equivalent in a different episode. But yeah, I was just thinking there was Southern sympathies in Maryland.
Oh yeah, no, and there were Southern sympathies in Missouri. I mean, the very fact that obviously Jesse James and as part of Quantrill's Raiders and so forth were able to successfully melt back into the woods and basically melt back into the populace is a testament to that. Same thing with the Southern sympathies and Confederate sympathies in the Shenandoah Valley. Even though the Union for large periods of time, right, basically had troops and a significant number of troops, right, patrolling those areas, the Morgan was able to basically at a moment's notice, call up 200, 300 men and go attack some vulnerable supply base.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the next raid that you have on your list? Because you had quite a few. So,
well, the next one I really want to talk about is I want to talk about Gearson's raid.
All right, well, give us a little bit of background on that because that one's not ringing a bell for me.
Well, let me pull up the map here. And then, oh, doggone it, I keep going to the wrong. There's what I'm looking for. There's this Gearson's raid.
All right, yep, it's up on the screen.
All right, and let's see if we can I blow this up? I'm going to try and increase
this.
And
this is the Union raid that helped Grant with the Vicksburg campaign, right?
Yes, it is. All right. At the start, this happened a little bit sooner. All right, obviously then this started in April 17th. Right, and Grierson is with Grant. They've discussed how they're going to try and take Vicksburg, and you see all the different attacks on Vicksburg. We're going to get more into these. All right, but Grierson.
Yeah, because I can't wait to talk about Grant flooding the whole area and having fucking alligators jumping on the deck of the gunboats. But anyway, go ahead. Right. Sorry. It's just a great story.
As you see, you have an attempted spoiling attack by Van Dorn, right, early on. He gets basically chased around and back down here again. Grierson then says, okay, if the South can do it, so can we. He said, what's more is I can sit up there and create enough of a havoc. And he convinces Grant that he can create enough of a havoc, all right, in this behind Southern lines to cause them to divert forces and also to divert their attention away from what Grant wants to do. Okay. Because of all these different failed attempts as you're looking through it. So Grierson starts right here, all right, from LaGrange basically, and runs all the way down. Now, his intention is not a raid to go back. And the Confederacy, once he begins his attack, the Confederacy begins to chase him because they're trying to capture him. Now, he has about 2,500 men. All right, that's basically the size of his troops. All right, and what he's doing is he's causing a lot of confusion. All right, so that they don't know what Grant is doing when Grant starts to create his latest advance, because these have been unsuccessful. All these had been earlier, right? Had been unsuccessful attempts. So he's now trying to force it on this side of the river to get across and move across. All right. And Grierson then brings this all the way down, causing these forces to chase him all the way out of Mississippi and actually all the way over into Baton Rouge. Now, Baton Rouge is a safe point. So his whole, because the Union gunboats are up, have taken this whole area. So basically what he's doing is he runs all the way from the north, all right, takes 2,500 men, burning bridges, burning railroads, everything else, all right, all the way across here. And you'll notice that part of the railroads for temporarily they cut is right here, which cuts them off from Atlanta, all right. And eventually you see Grant coming in there to take Jackson, but Mississippi. But Grierson's whole purpose is to divide the forces and cause the Confederacy to come and chase him, and it's actually very successful in that. All right. Now, there was a movie with John Wayne called The Horse Soldiers. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that. It's basically an homage to this, to where basically you see them going on a massive long-distance raid, and this absolutely electrifies the North, all right, on the success of this raid. All right. It gives a lot of needed support, or I shouldn't say support, but, good news that he's able to ride all the way through the South without the South catching him, all right, all the way down. And what do you have? This happens in, as you see, from April to May. This allows Grant to go to basically finally get across the river and get on the side of the Vicksburg side of the river, and then begin his assault.
So what the Confederacy should have did was send a few people to chase him, but stay focused on Grant. Instead, they fell for it, right?
Well, it didn't. It's not that they fell for it in that they didn't divide their forces. They didn't chase him from that standpoint. But what it did is they lost sight of Grant because they were trying to watch him, and they thought that he is he is part of Grant's forces. They made the mistake of thinking that this was part of Grant, and that this is where Grant was going to go. All right, because cavalry is used for scouting. Cavalry is used for these kind of points. They were basically chasing him with cavalry units. All right, all the way out. In fact, I think at one point Forrest's cavalry was actually trying to chase him down. Okay, but the problem is while the Confederate cavalry is busy chasing around Garrison, they lose sight of Grant, and Grant is finally able to get on the Vicksburg side of the river. And once he does that in force, it's Katie bar the door. All right, and we're going to talk about the Vicksburg campaign. But so from a tactical standpoint, it was successful. All right, he's able to go through. He's able to tear up railroad. He's able to sit up there and cause havoc. But also from a strategic standpoint, it's one of the few cavalry raids that actually, from a strategic standpoint, actually has an effect that's a positive effect for the side that he's on.
Well, I could think of maybe a couple, but they're more cavalry raids, not necessarily like Mosby or anybody. It's more like Forrest had a lot of success, but that wasn't necessarily a raid. So,
well, Forrest has a lot of success in certain regards, but what I'm talking about is it's a significant long-term effect. Forrest's raids don't have much of a long-term effect. Even his annoying raids when against Sherman, all right, while Sherman doesn't like Forrest and thinks of him as a frickin' pain in the ass and a threat to a point, at the same point it doesn't change any of his activities. It does slow him down to some degree, but not significantly.
I still think Vicksburg was the linchpin of the Confederacy, and they should have done something to get more troops over there to relieve the city. They were eating freaking rats, for God's sake. I mean, they were surrounded. How many times did they get sieged? I mean, holy shit.
They were only sieged once. They only went through the siege one time. They just held out for a longer period of time than many of the other siege areas. That was the only difference.
Yeah. And there was no breaking out of Vicksburg. They needed a force to come and relieve them. They needed a force to come and break the siege from the outside.
And there was no force available. And even if they did, what you probably would have seen is something along the lines of Caesar, right? They're at what's that?
You think Grant was on the level with Caesar? Now I think you're giving Grant a little too much credit.
I think that would have turned into something like Caesar's campaigns. Yeah, Caesar was not the
double like. Okay, so Caesar got surrounded, right? He built another defensive on the outside. He had to have troops on both ends. If Grant was stuck in that situation without more relief coming in for him, I think he would have been taken.
They would think of think of the ring around Vicksburg. All right, got it in your picture. You got a picture of Vicksburg, and you got Grant surrounding Vicksburg, right?
Yeah.
How's the Confederacy going to sit there and take another ring? All right, with more forces. All right, to totally invest Grant.
I don't know. You could have brought forces in from Texas. I know there wasn't that many out there, but you could have the Indian territories. Yeah, I mean, you just bring as many forces from the west as you can, because you can't take and split an army in Northern Virginia.
In addition,
you have to leave that alone.
In addition to that, think now: where are Grant's wings? What are they against?
The river.
Who controls the river with gunboats?
Yeah, that's a time, the CSS Virginia would have been nice, but
you would have had to manhandle it and actually physically carry it out of Virginia and put it on a railroad car.
Why not? It could be done.
And then assume that you were able to sit up there and transport it all the way across and stick it in the Mississippi.
It would have done far better good in the Mississippi, don't you think?
It would have been interesting. You got to remember that was a low draft thing. The Mississippi, I think it would have gotten stuck on a sandbar. That'd have been the end of it, to be honest. The Mississippi's deep and wide at certain points, but one of the problems with all the ironclads, actually, that many people don't, they don't fully appreciate, is the fact that they were heavy. They moved like slugs. Okay. And in a river like the Mississippi most of the time seems to be like a lazy moving river, but its current is actually pretty doggone fast and powerful. It would have been very difficult for them to maneuver at certain points, especially during certain areas, times of the season, certain times of the year. Right? Can you imagine what would happen during the spring thaws when all that river is just rushing through there? The gunboat would have just sailed right on down. Oh, well, look what we have in New Orleans. We got the CSS Virginia stuck on a sandbar.
You know what's interesting, though? You would think with all the river boats and all that were in the Mississippi before the war, that the Confederacy could have taken them and at least threw a couple guns on them and had somewhat of a presence in the Mississippi River that could have at least slowed down the Union gunboats.
The warfare like that is not very easy to do. Number one. Number two is to put something in that river, you've got to build it and then stick it in there, and then you got to put people on it. All right, and you can't do it with iron. All right, you got to remember iron is at a premium. Okay, so it's being reserved for other uses. You don't have enough supplies for everything that you want to do. Right, that's the main reason that you don't see more Southern ironclads isn't because a lack of will in the South or even a lack of ingenuity. It's the lack of steel. You just don't have the supplies to do it.
Yeah, but I'm saying you take a river steamer and you just throw a couple guns on it. Yeah, it's going to get blown up. Oh, well, grab another river steamer. How many
guns do you have to do that with?
Yeah. All right.
Right. If you're building guns, you want them to be effective, not just platforms that end up at the bottom of rivers constantly.
I'm just saying you had to slow the Union Navy down somehow in the Mississippi River. You had to control that river.
You did. You had the bluffs, and they were quite successful and quite formidable at Vicksburg. It wasn't until Vicksburg had to be taken by land. Vicksburg was not taken by the river.
All right. So, what's the next raid you wanted to touch upon?
I think the next raid,
because now we're kind of just getting into Vicksburg, which that's not this episode. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. The next one I really want to talk about is actually the Morgan raid. And let me get over to here. Is this sharing?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, for some reason my computer is locked up.
Oh, crap. Oh, hey, we'll give a little bit of background on it. We could at least talk about it.
Okay, hold on a second while I try and recreate all this stuff and find out what the hell's going on. Goodness me, everything is locking up on me.
Computers are evil.
Well, this one's being a pain in the ass, I can tell you that right now. I may have to bounce out for a little bit. I apologize. I'll be right back.
All right. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, sorry about the dead air. Just waiting on MC to fix whatever's going on.
Okay, let me see if I can pull up Morgan's raid now.
All right. Technical difficulties. I wish I had one of those. I wish I was using OBS. I could pop up a little technical difficulties thing at least.
Let me see if I can find a better map. Hold on a second. I'm looking for the map that I had up. The one I've got here. I'm not gonna worry about it so much. All right. Let me see if we can. I'll try and put this up again, and hopefully it won't crash on me this time.
Maybe mommy will drive you.
And this is not the best map, but hopefully it'll do. Can you see the map?
Yep. Yeah, I have it presented too. It's kind of small, but it's up there. Yep.
Well, this is the best I can do for it. And then I shrank it. Damn it.
Hey, at least your mic's on. I mean, you could be really having a boomer moment. No kidding.
Let me see if I can bring this back up one more time. I apologize.
Yeah, I still have you presented. It's all good.
All right. Let's go back to... I got to bring this whole thing back up. Doggone it. To hell with it. We'll just go to... We'll just go here. Come over here. I apologize for everybody. What we're pulling up right now is Morgan's raid. Morgan is a Confederate raid.
Yeah, it seems like most of the raids were perpetrated by the Confederacy. Was that more out of the desperation of the South, or was that just because that's all they really could do in the West?
There's a couple of reasons. Let's see if I can get. Will this actually appear now as a decent thing? No, I got it. Hold on a second. See if I can get this map up. Hold on.
Yeah, it's all good.
I apologize.
Oh, no, it's fine. Yesterday during the red eye, I freaking thought I was going to lose connection completely. I had the freaking F5, and then my internet went away, and I'm like, holy shit, this sucks.
Okay, now let's see if we can pull up this map. Can you see this map?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Now can you see it?
Yep.
Okay.
Good. All right, go ahead.
Sorry, everybody, waiting for Morgan's raid here. Morgan begins his raid on June 11th, 1863. Now, you got to remember, many people thought that this raid was being done in conjunction with the forces of Robert E. Lee invading Pennsylvania. And in reality, it was not, although it does take place more or less simultaneously. Now, Morgan is told, okay, to go ahead and go on this raid, even though it's not in conjunction. And of course, the effort is to try and get the forces of the Union more focused on this portion of the Tennessee, right, in an effort to try and relieve some of the pressure off of Richmond in general, okay? He is warned, however, do not, whatever, under any circumstances, go across the river, the Ohio River.
Why not?
Because of what happens. All right. He goes off with 2,500 men, all right, and 4 artillery pieces, and decides to come into Kentucky. The idea is to come into Kentucky and pull some of these forces out of these areas, specifically Rosecrans, right, and bring them back into Kentucky and so forth, right. He begins his raid. As you see, he goes through these areas. At the Ohio River, he was told not to go across. He goes across. All right. And then he starts rushing right on up through here. And you see now at this point, what has happened is the Union forces from Indiana block him from coming back across.
Yeah, but couldn't he cut back across the Ohio
There's once
and
again
go past Lexington.
he's being chased all the way through here, and in fact, at this point here, he does separate, and some of his forces do go fleeing back across the river, right?
That would be my move, yeah. Like right there,
but,
bam, back across to Ohio, and maybe even threaten Lexington.
But now you're behind these mountains here, and you can't get back home, right? I mean, because what you have here, all right, is is Burnside actually has forces through this area to prevent him from coming back down, all right.
Oh, okay.
And so while he can send part of his forces back across, and I think it's either here or here, it might have been at Buffington Island, right? He's able to send some of his forces to escape, but overall he's not able to escape. And in fact, as he goes through, he finally gets up and ends up in Smallville, right? And is forced to surrender. Now, you would think, okay, he's forced to surrender. He's sent to a prisoner of war camp. You would think that that ends his tale, but no, he actually digs a tunnel out from the federal forces and actually escapes.
Yes,
back across the lines from the federal prisoner of war camp. But in the process, he lost basically all of his men, all the equipment, and the 4 artillery pieces that he began the battle with.
Yeah, but that's some Southern ingenuity right there at the end. Like, screw this, I'm digging a tunnel. I'm out this bitch.
So, but from the north, it's the furthest incursion into the north of any of the Confederacy. He gets all the way into Ohio, and it is the basically the last hurrah of the Confederacy as far as their abilities to go in the north. And it does cause a little bit of a stir in the north because, I mean, it was a Confederate force. It was high up into the north. That it was looked upon as an attempt by the South to invade the northern territories in conjunction with, Robert E. Lee, even though the actual commands and everything really weren't coordinated at all. But it looks like coordination simply from the timing of it.
Now, if they were coordinated, though, do you think he would have been forced to surrender? Maybe he could have linked up with Lee and helped at Gettysburg instead. That's 2,600 men, you said, at Fort Cannon. That could have been useful. Pickett could have used some help.
He's a bit of ways away from Pennsylvania, okay? He's stuck up in Ohio, okay? And while Ohio
what he should have did was he should have kept going north and just burnt everything. If you're going to surrender anyway, just keep heading north and keep burning.
That's what he was doing. I mean, that's where he ends up, where he stopped there at Smallville. And he's out of supplies. He's out of material when he's forced to surrender. He can't even beat back a militia, right? A city militia to prevent him from doing anything. He doesn't have enough troops anymore. For all intents and purposes, I would say about 800 men from his 2,400 men actually escape. The rest of them are captured or killed.
So it's a failed raid. It's just
tactically it's a failed raid. Strategically, it has a mild effect on the north. All right, in that these things then become a concern. It also brings a little bit more favor upon Burnside. All right, because Burnside's forces are the forces that finally capture him. So Ambrose Burnside gets a little bit of his reputation back.
Could you imagine if he had more men and more supplies, though? He could actually did some damage and kept, like I said.
Can you imagine if Robert E. Lee had more men and more supplies, though?
What if he was backed up by Forrest or somebody? What if he was backed up by Jeb Stuart? Come on. That's what I'm saying. Something that's plausible.
Okay, Jeb Stuart isn't with Lee. He's over here trying to help
during Gettysburg any fucking way. Don't give me that bullshit. Like Lee should have fired him at Gettysburg, but yeah.
We'll get to Gettysburg. I disagree with you slightly. It is slight, but I do disagree with you slightly.
Well, don't get me wrong. I like Jeb Stuart. But like, no, man, you were the eyes of the freaking Army in Northern Virginia, and where were you? Out getting shoes. I know, I get it. We need shoes, but dude, come on.
Well, I mean, what do you expect? Okay,
Oh, man.
the final one I think I want to talk about, to be honest. And I have a bunch more, but there's one more that I really want to talk about, and this is toward the end of the war, and that is Price's raid. So let me get to the map for Price's raid, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we'll see if it works this time.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully I don't screw something else up here. Okay. Cancel. I hate having to bounce things back across here. All right, can you see it?
Yep. Yeah, let me present you to everyone again. There we go.
All right, so this is the latter part of the war. Okay, what you see, obviously, this is Sherman getting ready for his march. This is Hood's campaign. Price takes a small force and attempts to once again recreate a situation very similar to what Shelby had done, and he's trying to force them out of the Tennessee or relieve pressure here. All right, to create a raiding party all the way through Missouri, and this is, you were wondering who came close to St. Louis. This is an example. Price is the one who comes close to it. Right.
Yeah, because I remember a story where they were right outside of St. Louis, and they just figured they didn't have the forces to sack the town, so they turned around and left.
Let me see if we'll blow this up. There we go. All right, so you see him leaves from Batesville. He comes all the way across, right, to try and create havoc all the way through this area, all the way down, and then back down into Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Territory, and it ends up at Lanesbury. All right, this is an attempt. Notice once again, you're on the other side of the river. The reason you don't see a coordination is because the Union controls this area here. Is all under the control of the Union. All right, and it remains under control, even though Fort Pillow is taken and then retaken again. We'll be talking about the Fort Pillow a bit later. But you see what they're trying to do. They're trying to reestablish and pull these forces so that they can reconnect both sides of the Confederacy to bring back this. And you'll also notice, however, that while this is in the Arkansas up through Missouri, right here at Pilot Cove is where the closest that he gets. He comes into the west, hits these areas along the Kansas, Missouri border. All right, bounces back into Indian. This is the Indian Territory of Oklahoma. All right, which is pretty much Confederate land or Confederate sympathies all the way back. It's a ladder. It's a Hail Mary. It doesn't work. It doesn't relieve the pressure on Hood. All right, and it has no real effect. And of course, you end up with these string of disastrous battles from Hood, all right, in an attempt to try and end the suffering. There's a lot of Hood at Franklin catches a lot of abuse, and quite frankly, probably deservedly so.
Yeah, I don't really, like I said, the West is a little bit. I haven't studied it as much. What does Hood end up doing at Franklin?
He basically gets a lot of his men slaughtered with frontal attacks. There are historians that believe that what Hood was doing at that point was he was trying to punish his men for being disobedient and being a problem, for losing military discipline.
Oh, wow.
And it's the end. It's the dying throes of the Confederacy. All right, it was still a you know, Hood at this point has a force. Okay, it's not strong enough to stop Sherman. He tries several engagements with Sherman when it came to the Battle of Atlanta. All right, it is an absolute, you know, that he is defeated repeatedly. He just doesn't have the forces available to him to actually stop Sherman in any way, shape, or form. All right, but he was willing to try and fight. When Sherman does take Atlanta, the problem that Sherman has, of course, is how is Atlanta supplied? Right? How are his forces supplied? Well, his forces are supplied through Chattanooga. All right. Remember when I was saying that Chattanooga is a major railroad hub? Well, now it's his lifeline into Atlanta. It's what he's using in Atlanta. Now, Sherman understands that he is on the end of his supply line, all right, in Atlanta, and that it can, in order to do that, he would have to try and constantly keep the railroad open. All right. And we'll talk about Sherman when we get to the battles of Atlanta and so forth. But the reality is this is one of the reasons why you see Sherman say, you know what, I'm doing something different. All right. But regardless, all right, what happens is Price's raid is an attempt to try and force the Union to divide its forces and reinforce these other areas within Tennessee, specifically in Missouri. All right. With the idea of a threat of Confederate forces, basically, once again, relieving and taking control of the Mississippi. But of course, these are raids. They can't actually stand and fight, because if they attempt to stand in any place any long period of time, okay, they will be defeated in detail, because they can be easily surrounded. And so they just don't have the forces. They just don't have the supplies to actually create a credible threat for the people in the West. In the West, there's a lot of guerrilla activity anyway. All right. So which in some ways lessens the effect, because both sides are raiding through these areas. And like I said, we'll talk about, you know, Quantrill's raiders and so forth, back and forth, the Jayhawker raids, etc. People are kind of immune to it. They know that there's no standing, that they're not a significant infantry force. They're not infantry. And as long as there's no infantry with them, they don't look at them as a credible threat to hold it. Now, the other reason I wanted to talk about Price at the end of the wars is because of this, and it's a personal thing. I actually know, all right, one of the people that was related to Price.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
All right. So, and unfortunately, he has recently died of cancer, but Kevin Price was a good friend of mine, and he was related to this gentleman. Now, he himself was much more of a, if you talked about the Civil War with him, he was much more of a Union man than he ever was a Confederate. But he does have relatives. He was related to Sterling Price.
Huh, that's really interesting. Don't you think if they could have coordinated these raids more, and instead of one raiding party, you had 5 swooping around, then maybe they could have accomplished their goal? It seems like they got, 2,000 men together and, go raid. Why not have smaller raiding parties and just have them everywhere? Just burning shit everywhere to where the regular troops have to pull out. And
well, what you would have saw then, you got to remember, if you lower the number of troops that you're using too significantly, all right, let's say you take it down to from 800 to down to 100. If it's 100 men attempting to hit a town of like 2,000 or 3,000 small little hamlets and stuff, you're going to be defeated. All right, you're not going to get very far, right? Because a small number of troops can easily handle you. In fact, a garrison with 30 troops, all right, becomes a problem for 100 troops trying to take it. Okay, so the idea that you could do it with lower numbers is a bit of a misnomer. You got to remember the Union has small little pockets of troops all around, stationed all around in several of these areas. The garrisons aren't large, right? They're only 100 men or 50 men in some cases, but 50 men or 100 men in some cases can easily, from a defensive position, defend against 100 and so forth.
Okay. I suppose you have a good point, but what about 500 men as your bare minimum? You got and you could have took that 2,600 and made 3 raiding parties out of it. Now you have 3 separate lines of attack, 3 separate cities burning simultaneously. It looks like more of a threat overall
The problem
to pull
with
the Federals out.
The problem with doing that is the Federals can do the same thing. They can consolidate some of their forces and then actually defeat you in detail. One of the problems of a raiding party has is keeping lines of communication open, and because you're basically jumping off and you're not telling anybody where you're going. Okay, so you're no longer in telegraph communication necessarily with your home forces. So you can't, once you kick off, it's the same problem that you end up with in World War I. When they kick off a fight, there's no way of knowing when you kick off, the battle. The generals then have no idea where the forces are at. So the ability of then these 3 separate dispirited forces, them coordinating from that standpoint, becomes absolutely impossible. There's just no way once they separate and start attacking that they can coordinate and move as a group. Okay, so what would happen then, of course, is the Union would say, okay, which one is the worst one? We're going to surround it and take it out, and then go from each one and defeat them in detail. You have to be big enough to where the Union can't quickly respond. And you got to remember, the Union communication is on the defense. They're pulling backwards. All right, it's not. They don't have the same lack of communication skill that a raiding party has. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know. I'm still here. I ate a piece of my wife has this apple bread. I ate one little piece, and all the kids are attacking me now. So sorry. Yeah. But no, that makes total sense. Actually, I guess you don't want to make orders either. You don't want to be like, "Hey, go to A to B to C," because then if somebody gets captured, they have the plans for all 3 of the raiding parties.
Well,
So
what's more is that can you carry them out? All right. One of the problems with widespread assaults such as this is the fact that coordination becomes very difficult. It's great if everyone can keep to a timetable, but as you can see throughout the Civil War in various times, all right, the weather, the terrain prevents you from actually moving at times at the speed that you're expecting. So when you're trying to do a coordinated assault or a coordinated attack, a lot of those don't even happen, even when the forces are directly under the commands. And you're going to see this coming up, all right? As a matter of fact, when we talk about Gettysburg, all right, at Gettysburg, a lot of the attacks, all right, committed by Lee again in Gettysburg are not coordinated, and the reason they're not coordinated is the difficulty of being able to communicate these orders over a large area. All right, now you're talking about extending that area dramatically with raids and trying to coordinate it, and there's just no way you're going to be able to do that. There's just no way it's going to be successful. You're dealing with rough terrain, you're dealing with forested and wooded areas, and so forth.
I know we're going to talk about Gettysburg later, but you brought it up. Do you think that Lee didn't write his orders clear enough? I've heard that labeled against him many times.
Okay, let me ask a different question. Why were his orders always clear before, and then all of a sudden now they're not?
Yeah, I think they were clear even in Gettysburg, is my opinion. Although I haven't read copies of the orders personally yet. I am going to college, so hopefully maybe I got digital copies in the library. Hopefully.
I think a lot of people from the South, all right, are looking for excuses, all right, and are ignoring the realities on the ground, all right, that Lee and his troops were facing. Okay. A lot of people were they make grandiose claims and some of it's from the commanders themselves and about what they could do. All right. But you're going to see this. Okay. We're going to have some discussions, but I think that the expectations of what people could do during the battles of Gettysburg are way overblown. I honestly think that There's no way, especially when we talk about it. And we'll get into it. All right. Some of the claims that, well, if Jackson was there, they would have been able to do this, I think are just nonsensical. I truly do.
I've been guilty of making that claim if Jackson would have survived. But yeah, I just think it would have went a little bit different.
It would have. With Jackson there, I think the battle would have been different. Okay, the outcome wouldn't have changed though. But the battle would have been different. It would have been fought in a different area in a different manner, so it would have been a different battle entirely. But I really think that the outcome would probably have been exactly the same. One of the things that I'm going to point out is when we get into that, you'll see it from a logistical standpoint. Lee is really in a bad way. It was a Hail Mary attempt. All right, he had gotten a view of his army that his army could defeat, large numbers of men. All right, and which was true because he was able to do it, but that was more to do to the commanders he was facing at the time, not the commander he was facing at Gettysburg.
Well, no, and he was also trying to influence the election and get Lincoln out of office. That way they could sue for peace.
I mean, not so much per se. I mean, it was an effort to obviously he was hoping to defeat the Army of the Potomac on Northern soil so that he could then say, look, let's stop. So he then could deliver a thing saying, you can't defeat us. We can defeat you everywhere. Right. But of course, the problem is at the same time, you're also losing everywhere. All right. So he was trying to present a situation from a stalemate, not so much affect the election because the election isn't until the following year. You got to remember the 1984 or 1864 is when the election is. So it's still a year away when he launches this assault. All right. This is an effort to sit up there and basically bring the futility of the war to the North. All right. And it is a grand failure.
Yeah, no, and we will get to that. Is there any other raids you want to talk about? We did start a bit late, or we could wrap it up here.
I think that we should probably wrap it up here. There are several more raids that we can talk about at a different time if you wanted to. But I think that at this point, it's otherwise we'll go on forever. There's lots of raids we can cover still. I don't want to end this out too long.
What do you want to do next week?
It's your choice. Pick your poison. There's two big ones that are outstanding now.
Let's get Vicksburg out of the way.
Okay, we'll talk about Vicksburg first.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It's been fun. We're back on tomorrow for the Red Eye stream. It'll be, the news. That's what the Monday show is now. So good night. Good luck. And don't go to France. We're out of here. Peace.